So I've always been one who believes it's really important to have a deep understanding of exposure and how your exposure is going to change your image. I've seen so many people who kind of shoot images and they don't come out the way that they expect. And it's because they don't really have that deep understanding of exposure. Now, some of this information is going to be a little bit more advanced. And even if you don't necessarily grasp the entire thing, that's okay. We're going to work our way up to that point. So to just start with, what I want to start with is understanding it's always important to expose a little bit darker when you're shooting video. And why do I say that? So even if you have a really bad camera that doesn't really have a very high dynamic range, you can always still pull the information up and down in post-production. Now, if you overexpose your image or overexpose your video image, what happens is that you can't actually get that information back. Once it's overexposed, the information is permanently lost. So that's why I always recommend to try to underexpose just a little bit. So that way, when you do take your video into a non-linear editor like Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro or some other editor, you can always make your little adjustments and try to make those adjustments later on. Now, with that being said, it's important to understand what to use in order to kind of help out with these. So there are certain things called external monitor. Now, what this is that this is something that you can use in order to give you more advanced information that you can use in order to make sure you're exposing your video properly. So if you're shooting us on a still camera or a camera that doesn't have those features, what happens is that you're usually relying on the image that you're looking at in order to get your exposure. And that's not what you should do. The reason why you shouldn't do that is because you're relying on your eyes, and sometimes your eyes can play tricks on you. But not only that, the monitor that you're looking at might be playing tricks on you as well. So if you're looking at something like a waveform monitor, it's actually pulling the data that's on the sensor. And that's what you really care about. So what does that look like? Well, when you look at a waveform monitor, it'll show you what's actually clipping, what's below the levels, what's underexposed. It shows you all of that information, and then you can make your adjustments in the camera. So let's say, for example, it was way too dark, it's in the shadows, but it looks fine on the video. What I can do is I can make adjustments to pull up some of those shadows in order to get it in the proper range, right? Now, another thing I want to talk to you guys about is something that's kind of becoming more popular, is something called log shooting. And so with Canon, they have a log called C-Log. With Sony, they have a log called S-Log. And what that is pretty much they're kind of smashing all the information into all of the midtones or in the middle of the shot. And then later on in post-production, they're allowing you to kind of stretch out that information in order to maximize the dynamic range of the image. Now, what are the pros and cons of this? Well, the pros are that you have a lot more information and ways that you can actually create the mood and the tone of your video to make it look a certain way. So if you wanted to look more sinister or darker, you can do that. Or if you want to make it more playful and light, you can do that. If you want to make it more blue, if you want to make it more red, you can do all these things and it'll make it look consistent, which is really, really cool. Now, the thing is that it's really important to know that by doing that, it takes a lot better information. Higher quality bit rates are really involved. So if you're shooting on a compressed format or a compressed codec, for example, like on one of your DSLRs, which is really compressing the information, what happens is that when you take it into post-production, if you try to stretch it out or make these changes, it'll pretty much just break the whole image up. It'll look like a bunch of noise and a bunch of little dots moving around. It'll make for a really ugly image. Now, one way to get around that is that if you use a higher quality camera with higher quality images, a higher quality video quality, you can stretch it out and you can move stuff around and it'll still look really, really good. So those are some things that you should really think about. What type of camera you're using? What's the bit rate of the camera, right? What's the bit rate of the information? What kind of card are you using? How much information is being captured every second? These are all really important questions that are going to help you in the post-production process and help you in the planning process to make sure that you know what your camera is capable of and you know what you're going to be able to do in post-production to make sure you're getting the most out of your camera. Now, this is some advanced stuff, and I'm really happy to talk to you guys about that in further detail, but this is just enough information to just kind of get you started. And I think that one point that I made is one I want you to take home. Always underexpose just a little bit because you can always recover some of those highlights. If you overexpose, just remember it's lost forever.